Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 13th of December 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that is mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. The game in the background is, of course, Starcraft 2, a fairly entertaining game on Antigua's shipyard, whereby two things are demonstrated. One, having lots of bases and drones is good, and two, hey, infestors are hilarious. It wasn't a good game, but it was quite enjoyable. First email comes in from Liam that says this: recently I was playing Battlefield 3 and my mother, after watching me play for about 5 minutes, asked me how I felt when playing the game. I told her that I felt I was having a good time. She continued saying that games like Battlefield and Call of Duty are made to paint a picture that joining the army is great fun and that it glorifies the whole experience of fighting, killing and defending your country. At first I thought that was ridiculous because to me playing these games does exactly the opposite. Both the fact that I'm terrible at the game and the stuff people go through. She also said that some games are government military funded just so more people will join the army. It got me thinking, do some people feel pulled towards joining the army by first-person shooters? Incidentally, FPS shooters, that's first-person shooters, where you are actually tasked with shooting other FPSs, which is quite tricky. Anyway, is it some form of cryptic propaganda? I think the whole thing's ridiculous. What are your thoughts? Well, there is an example of a game that was just that. In fact, it was America's Army. America's Army was designed to be a recruitment tool for the US Army. It was funded and developed by the US Army. There's no real doubt about that. However, the idea that Battlefield as a recruitment tool is pretty damn ridiculous. I mean, one, it's made by DICE, which is a Swedish developer, and until, I believe, July 2010, if I recall correctly, when they started to phase it out, Sweden had conscription anyway, mandatory military service. So they don't really need to glorify or recruit people because they're going to do it anyway. But the idea that, say, major FPSs are designed for that is ridiculous, absolutely absurd for that reason. You know, we've got one that's American developed, the major one, Modern Warfare, and then the other major one, which is Swedish developed. No, it's Activision and Sledgehammer and Infinity Ward and Treyarch aren't being funded by the government. That's just absolutely absurd. An example from gameplay and storytelling perspective that would, to me, demonstrate beyond the shadow of a doubt that it's obviously not funded by the government would be the end of Call of Duty 4, which was, quite frankly, a little bit shocking. And if you're going to create propaganda, I certainly wouldn't do it that way. That seems like a fairly bad idea. Let's have a look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the scene where everyone got all up in arms over no Russian. You really think that's government funded? Come on! Do me a favour. No, it's not. And the thing is that the depictions, even in MMSs, modern military shooters, are just so unrealistic and silly that there's no way that anybody in their right mind would put the two together and say, oh, this is how the real army's going to be like. You can't be serious. Let's see. Battlefield, what's it known for? Crashing jeeps into helicopters, for instance. Attaching C4 to a jeep, then driving it off a cliff. Jumping out of your plane mid-flight, firing an RPG at the plane following you, and then jumping back into the plane. Yeah, that's realistic. And then let's not even go into Modern Warfare. Yes, juggernaut suits, nuclear bombs, attack dogs, all sorts of other nonsense. No, absolutely not. They're nowhere near realistic in terms of shooting mechanics or anything to do with the army. In fact, the only games that are most certainly not glorifying war in the sense of, say, Armor, for instance, and the old Operation Flashpoint, not the new ones. Stuff by Bohemia Interactive. That's pretty damn realistic. And then, of course, you can look at the various iterations of America's Army, which are also fairly realistic. Now, it's a pretty nonsensical argument as far as I'm concerned. Good thing to point out would be that an awful lot of soldiers play things like Call of Duty and Battlefield and Gears of War while they're actually on assignment in a country. And you've got a lot of US military outposts and bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, for instance, where they have consoles set up where they play these kind of games. If this was really propaganda stuff, do you seriously think that soldiers actually out there on the front line who have experienced the horrors and realities of war would really be playing that stuff? No. There's a complete disconnect between the two. It's fun to use modern military hardware in an unrealistic environment because guns are cool and vehicles are cool. And for God's sake, I had, when I was a kid, all over my wall, I had these cards with pretty much every military aircraft you can possibly imagine. The hundreds of these sort of square cards that had stats on, all the way through from biplanes to modern jets. They were all over my wall. Did that make me want to be a fighter pilot and join the war? Absolutely not. Hardware is cool. It's really expensive, awesome-looking military hardware. And that's why you want to put those things into games, because it does give a slight tinge of authenticity, certainly, but all that does is help enhance the immersion and just give it a bit of a cool factor that having fake weapons and fake planes and such simply does not provide. But as a recruitment tool, no, I definitely don't think so. This one comes in from Red Mage that says, I've been having some issues with some of my console gaming peers in college. Before I continue, I'd like to point out that I do find console gaming to be a completely valid way to get your daily dose of fun, and that I do in fact play console games myself whenever I, for whatever reason, cannot play games on a PC. My problem is that many of my peers find it difficult to see any reason behind why a person would ever play games on a PC. I've been playing PC games for as long as I can remember, and I've had trouble understanding why gaming on a PC is such an alien concept to some people. I've in fact ended up in some rather heated discussions over why the PC is a better platform, and yet people continue to throw arguments at me over why consoles are better than PCs that frankly aren't even all that valid. People have argued such things as better controls, better games, more games, larger community, and most astoundingly better graphics. The illusion that some people have is that consoles can handle better graphics than a PC can. They also can't understand the fact that the PC is a great platform for indie developers to start with. As an indie developer on the PC, there are no limits to what you can create, and you can publicize your work in a huge variety of ways. I simply don't see the PC as a valid gaming platform. I'd like to know what your take on this is. I mean, what do you think my take on it is? It's an absolutely ridiculous argument. I mean, you're talking about stuff that's just factually incorrect. There are some points that are brought up there that are valid. I mean, certainly a better graphics is not a valid point. A console is not capable of better graphics than a PC. That is simply impossible. But it is capable of better graphics than a PC of that cost. I mean, for instance, you can buy a 364, I mean, you can get the really basic model, if I recall correctly, in this country for £99. Good luck building a PC for 99 quid that can do graphics, or indeed do anything, in fact. For God's sake, my graphics card costs 4 times that, and that's just one of them. PC gaming in terms of hardware is expensive. It is a premium way to game, and it is, as a result, a better way to game because you have higher tech kit, you have higher performance kit to work on. But the analogy that I've made before is it's the difference between a Kia and a Bentley. They'll both get you from point A to point B, but nobody in their right mind argues that a Kia is better than a Bentley outside of very niche things. For instance, a Kia may have better gas mileage than a Bentley, or petrol mileage. I use gas mileage because the Americans would get confused by the word petroleum. But the Bentley is still a superior piece of engineering, and that's just objectively true. It is a higher quality vehicle. Both are valid ways of getting from point A to point B, though. In terms of things like more games, well, you're not going to have more games, but you do have quite a lot of games that you can't get on PC, which is fairly annoying. It's becoming less and less the case, but there are games that don't get ported over. There's plenty of console exclusives, particularly on PS3, for instance. Some Xbox exclusives get over to the PC, but PS3 ones rarely, if ever, do. And as a direct result, there are quite a few games on console you can't get on PC, but there are also PC games you can't get on console. I think the problem with trying to prove a point to people that are into the latest AAA titles is that there aren't all that many AAA titles on PC. Outside of MMOs, generally speaking, you don't get that many anymore, unfortunately. Everything's either cross-platform or it's some kind of indie game whereby you are going to have to try and prove to people that are into Call of Duty that somehow indie game with its amazing art noir graphic style is better than that. You're not going to have that happen, are you? You're talking about people that don't really have a lot of knowledge about gaming in general. They don't know how games work. They don't have enough experience of game mechanics, game design. They don't understand what an aesthetic is or what innovation is in regards to indie development. But the point is that doesn't make their choice of games invalid, and no one should ever claim that it does. You can play whatever you want. Life is far too short to get hung up on such things as long as you don't try and shove it in everyone else's face. The thing is that consoles are designed with gaming in mind, and as a direct result, they tend to do it pretty well. They do it to a decent enough degree. If you're having arguments with people that think that a console is better, and of course they're objectively wrong on most parts, not all, like I said, there are larger communities. I mean, by community, what they probably mean is more of my friends are online on this that I can play with. That's not really a large community, but you've got to play on the platform that everyone else has, and for a lot of people, that's a really big deal, honestly. Multiplayer gaming with a certain group of friends is a massive deal, perhaps more so on consoles. It still is on PC as well, you know, getting on Vent and, of course, the whole idea of clans, but on console, it's very common to get home from work, you log on, you party up with your friends, and you go and play a game. That is really common. And I would say that, if anything, that's one of the most important values that you would have to understand about owning a console and thinking that the console is the best gaming platform, because you couldn't really have those experiences with your friends on a gaming platform that they don't own. However, it's not really worth getting into so many arguments over it. It's objective fact that the PC is the superior gaming platform in terms of technical prowess. That's factual. You can't argue with that any more than you can say that water isn't wet. This is true, but they are all perfectly capable of getting on with things, and I just wish that people would stop squabbling over it, because it's silly. So much wasted time that could have been spent actually playing games. I suppose people who are stuck in school or whatever who can't play games are going to do the next best thing, which is argue about which games are better and whose system happens to be the best. So what I'd suggest you do is be the annoying, aloof, PC, elitist, master race dude that everybody hates. Because, hey, you might as well fit yourself into some kind of socially unacceptable category. Don't do that, it's a terrible idea. This one comes in from Janik that says, I'm becoming increasingly annoyed with people forgetting that they were once themselves children, which, I mean, is some people today are very quick to jump on the bandwagon of let's deny kids video games that are violent, completely ignoring the fact that they were once entertained by such things when they were kids. For some reason, people seem to think that their or others' children shouldn't see anything violent like they did, totally ignoring the fact that such experiences are part of what made them who they are today, and instead, in a foolish attempt to shelter their kids from anything remotely violent, denying them some of the most fun things in life. For instance, as a child, I played hours upon hours without my parents' knowledge of Diablo, Age of Empires, Starcraft, Doom 2, Might and Magic 7, and let's not forget the dual Carmageddon 2. And if I was an adult, and I had the right to decide whether or not I should be allowed to, I would allow it any day. This is also why it upsets me when people want game ratings enforced, because they're effectively making lives worse for any kids who are like myself. So, what do you think? Am I just overreacting, or is there some truth to my words? Well, it's about parental responsibility. I wasn't allowed to play a lot of violent games as a kid. I'd have small experiences with them when I went over to a friend's house. For instance, like, the first time I played Doom wasn't at my house, it was at someone else's house. And I had a little bit in there here and there. The funny thing is that actually that made it all the more exciting, because like it's tasting the forbidden fruit, isn't it? It's playing stuff that you had no way of playing otherwise. And funnily enough, that actually made me socialize a hell of a lot more with my friends, because I could go over there and play some games, and they'd come over to mine and play some games they didn't have access to, because I actually used to use a Acorn Archimedes system, which had some games that people couldn't get on other systems, and some of them were actually quite good. I had a load of people always want to come over to play Stunt Racer 2000 and Starfighter 3000. Some of you might remember that on the PlayStation and Saturn. Trust me, that version was nowhere near as good as Starfighter 3000 on the Acorn Archimedes RISC PC. Holy hell, was that a good game. So very, very good. I think it's necessarily a lot of people wanting age ratings to be enforced. It's just they're wanting parents to actually pay attention to them and not just blindly buy very violent games for kids. It's a concern for the children. It's also a concern for the way that gaming is perceived. I think this is perhaps the most important point for a lot of more activist gamers, is that they don't want parents purchasing unsuitable titles and then going crazy and making a big fuss over how gaming is too violent and is corrupting our kids, even though it was technically their fault. Age ratings actually exist for another important reason as well, which is to remind people that gaming is not a children's toy anymore, and it hasn't been for a very long time. And that's something that a certain generation does seem to continuously forget for whatever reason. Gaming is aimed at pretty much all age ranges now in some form or another, and one of the biggest demographics for gamers is, of course, males aged 25 to 34. That is a huge demographic, especially in the West, for gamers in general, and it's one that is very frequently catered to, as you can see by the releases that are aimed exactly at that particular area of the market. But of course, kids are going to want to play those games as well because it's cool to do so. I don't think that going crazy and enforcing age ratings to the point where it becomes draconian is reasonable. I think, once again, it comes down to personal parental supervision, and that should be encouraged. I don't know that the current age rating system really encourages that, but I think that that's a much, much deeper problem. I don't think that's something that gaming companies can solve themselves, honestly. I just don't think that is the case. It's a fundamental problem within today's society and within the parenting of certain people. We can't fix that. Gaming cannot fix that. And in fact, that's actually part of the problem, that games are being used as parenting tools. And by parenting tools, I mean just sit in front of this for an hour and leave mummy and daddy alone. They're not being used to teach anything. They're not being used to learn anything. They're simply being used as babysitters. And that is a massive problem. I don't see how that can be solved, honestly, without some kind of ridiculous contrivance. And it's also not developers and publishers' responsibility, is it? Information is being given to parents. They simply don't pay attention to it. Giving more information isn't going to help if those parents aren't willing to listen. The information is out there for anyone smart enough to read it on the back of the box, or indeed just type a few words into Google. Unfortunately, as we've seen, not only through parents, indeed everyone on the internet, using Google and researching products and finding out information for yourself is a skill that seems to be lacking in pretty much every age range. And as far as I'm concerned, let me Google that for you should be tattooed onto the arms of every newborn baby on a genetic level in the style of In Time. Then, only then, may we have a better society. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. Email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. Just to remind you guys, Humble Indie Bundle 4 is out. I would highly recommend checking it out. It has a really good selection of games. It's over at humblebundle.com. It's Jamestown, which I've done a WTF of already, by the way, so don't ask me for that. Bit Trip Runner, Super Meat Boy, also done a video of that. Shank, which I've also done a video of, and Night Sky HD. As far as I'm concerned, Jamestown and Shank are the two really standout parts of that bundle, with Meat Boy being incredibly frustrating, but also very good. And if you pay more than the average, which you should, pay a reasonable amount for these damn things, for God's sake. Let's prove that PC gamers aren't all a bunch of skinflints. You get Gratuitous Space Battles and Cave Story Plus, which are both really great games as well. Go check out humblebundle.com. And we also won the YouTube contest, by the way. The portrait art did indeed triumph over the evil botting menace. As we saw, there's a lot of suspicion that the other person had some supporters that were using voting bots or whatever, but it's okay. Sheer firepower was brought to bear, and they could not withstand firepower of that magnitude. Unfortunately, this also means I'm going to have to sing Santa Baby, but that's going to have to wait until I actually get over this cold, because I'm coughing my guts out and have a really sore throat. But I will do it. I am not one to make a promise that I cannot keep. It will happen. Okay, folks. I'll see you next time.